Decron, War 101. That's the name of the game. The goal here is that you're walking away understanding the terminology that you're going to hear not only myself say, but also terminology that you can become familiar with and use in the middle of a war to communicate to the rest of your group. Communication is the name of the game, and this can be a big thing here, but ultimately we're focused on things like terminology, general concepts of where everyone is in war, and then how you should expect the army to play so that you can play your role in confidence that they know what the fuck they're talking about. So terminology-wise, high level or army level, that's things that impacts all 50 people. So things like, hey, as a 50-man, how do we play on the last point, for example? Medium level is group level. Hey, as a quad group, how do I control space on my quad? As a disruptor group, how do I control my lane? Low level or individual level, that's, hey, how do I not be an idiot and stam out? Hey, how do I use my abilities in the right order? Or micro skills is another way to understand them as. Another term for high level is also macro. AoE is an acronym for area of effect. Usually any ability that you could put on a location and then impacts anyone in that location. Like Ice Storm, Sacred Ground is an AoE heal, for example. Yeah. By the way, I am live on Twitch, just so you guys are aware. If I get any questions from Twitch, I will verbalize them before I answer them. Vice versa for Discord chat. I'm actually going to stand for this. All right. Otherwise, playing your life. When I tell you to play your life, what I mean by that is you're not necessarily beholden to staying on your respective position. So if you're bot right quad, for example, you don't have to stay bot right. Your goal is to play wherever you can stay alive. Yes, you're goddamn right. I have that standing desk. But a ball team, usually this is, two bruisers, a Void Gauntlet, Ice Gauntlet, some sort of quad DPS, and a healer, right? Normally, all of that but the quad DPS is just operating as a 4-man cell in their respective quad. So if I'm bot right quad, for example, I'm going to have my bruisers and my Void Gauntlet, Ice Gauntlet playing together as a 3-man, and that healer is focused on healing them. All 3 members of that team should be using or calling out all their abilities to their group, because otherwise, how the fuck does your team know what you're doing to help them, other than hoping in one hand and shitting in the other. A disruptor team is a team that primarily consists of players meant to take out enemy lights as a whole, or disrupt them, some would say. So for example, with a healer, right? You don't necessarily have to kill the healer in order to kill the rest of the group. If you save your abilities that stagger that healer, you can use them when that healer goes to heal at those critical moments, and then suddenly that player is able to die because they didn't get the heal. White team is a unique set of people. Usually they have to be put into insane asylums when they're not in wars, because who the fuck enjoys this? But there's a concept of flanking the opponent no matter what, and I'll go into this a little bit more detail, but the white team is created because ultimately at some point you reach the end of the fight. White team is normally fighting in Narnia, for lack of a better term, where they're not really close to the point. The white team's job is to either get into their backline by completely flanking around the entire army, first killing the enemy white team, or making sure that the enemy white team doesn't have an impact if that enemy white team is a better team than you. So it's something that you have to be able to drop the ego and acknowledge where you are compared to the enemy you're facing and play accordingly. Now, obviously, even if you play like you're losing in that type of situation for any of these teams, the moment you start winning, you should also know how to play aggressively. So please don't misunderstand that statement. Stat padding, I'm sure you guys have heard it, normally used as an insult. It's usually people who are like, I'm going to throw this fireball because there's 20 players over there, instead of, I'm going to throw that fireball because we're crashing on 20 players. There's a really big difference there. If I'm the only one using my abilities on a group of 20 players, I'm going to go on a limb here and say it's probably not going to work out for me, right? They're going to get healed up immediately, and it's as if I never use that ability, except for the fact that I still have that cooldown. That was an example of stat padding. Looking in naked maelstorming as a bruiser is another example of stat padding, where, oh, there's a bunch of players, let me just jump in, maelstorm, and get out. If I'm not calling a crash in that location, there's no reason you should be using abilities like that, shy of when you're trying to build detonate charge. But we'll get into that in a bit. But those are some of the terminology I'm going to use throughout this, so let's keep moving forward. I don't really give a shit if you're the best player, you're the worst player, you're somewhere in between. If you're the motherfucker who tilts because you died twice in content, or tilts because a dungeon doesn't go your way or a raid doesn't go your way, you're gonna get fucking tilted in wars every goddamn time. You really gotta have mental resilience, because if you can't be mentally tough, you can't be making sane, logical decisions. The moment you allow your enemy to trigger you, your emotions are what are determining your actions instead of the practice that you've put into being, for lack of a better term, the best player you can be. So, if there's anything you take away from this, if you're fucking tilting, you're constantly whining like a little bitch in comms because, oh, things aren't going your way, you're a part of the problem. Master that mental resiliency and be better. High-level factors I want everybody here to be aware of. Respawn timers. You guys here, usually we have a bot in Legacy and in a couple of the more competitive servers. They even have respawn callers where somebody from out of game or out of server even may come in, watch a bunch of the streams of the people actually fighting the war, and then just keep the shot caller updated with respawn timing. Why is that important? It's fine to die if it's like 2 or 3 seconds until the next respawn, because you're going to respawn immediately. It's not okay to die when there's 30, 40 seconds left before the next respawn wave. And that happens a lot. Shit, yesterday I had a 40-second respawn timer. Like, it happens. You have to be cognizant of the respawn so you can understand when you can play aggressively and when you can't. Historically, crashes are normally called about a second or 2, sometimes even 3, right before a respawn wave. Why? Because you're trying to catch them before they can react and realize that they're now sitting at a long respawn. Because if I can jump in and kill even 1 or 2 people on the enemy team, and let's say nobody dies on our side, and we only have a 1-person advantage, let's say, I'm still going to build tick on point. I also now have a number advantage for a very long time as an army. So if we can continue to steamroll that, crashes don't need to be 3, 4, 5 people dying. Crashes can be 1, 2 people die at most and everybody disperses then, instead of being greedy for those 2 other people that are low. Because if you don't lose anybody, you're still up 1 or 2. But if you stay in long enough to kill that 3rd or 4th person and 6 of us die, we just lost that crash. And there's a couple times yesterday that happened. So when you're getting your VOD reviewed, I really want you to pay attention to those moments and see whether you could have done something differently, be it leaving the crash sooner, what was I saying, because ultimately there was a lot of people I saw that either weren't responding when I was calling for spreads and wasn't actually responding to crashes. But that'll come with time, all right? But I know I went a little bit of a rant, but like that's why respawn timers are so important. It literally, think of respawn timers as the tempo in a song, but it is the tempo for the actual war itself. Point tick determines how aggressive you can play, especially as an attacking army. If you're an attacking army and you don't have any tick at all, you can be as aggressive as you want objectively. Why do I say that? No, that's the caveat here is the situations we're talking about, it is an even fight between the two, right? If you don't have any tick, you don't have anything to lose as an attacker. So an attack or a aggressive action can be very beneficial. It's why attacking armies will actually crash a lot more than defending armies. Defending armies are more about recrashes than crashes. The reason for that is, as attackers, we can make a million fucking mistakes, but if we do it right that last time, that could be us taking the point. So technically, we just have to make the defense make 4 mistakes. There's 3 points and then the point inside the fort. So I'll get more into like, hey, what can you do at certain levels of point taking and what you can't. Flank angles. That's what we were briefly covering earlier, but the concept here, let me just pull up a raid plan real quick. My plans. Let's take one of these. Get rid of that there. Yeah, flank angles. So if this is B point here, right? The enemy team, their pressure is coming from fort. So what that means is their pressure is also going towards the point, right? So that means that they're the strongest if you're coming in the opposite direction of them. If you're coming straight at them here, you're hitting. It's like if you're going 30 miles and they're going 30 miles in a car, you're hitting at 60 miles an hour, basically. Think of it like that, right? So if you were to sideswipe these motherfuckers, right? Suddenly it's not as dangerous to you. If you're able to hit them from behind, right? It's not as dangerous to you in this case. Why? Because they're not actively trying to stop you from coming in these directions. Engaging from behind the opponent, like when we say behind, we're saying like if they're oriented towards war camp, then behind them is from fort essentially. If this is the best place to engage, and from war camp is the worst place to engage, what that means is that if I instead of coming straight here, if I instead go like this is still better than obviously without the extra loop-de-loop, right? But wait, why aren't you? Let me just delete this real quick because it's gonna bother me. The glories of a vertical mouse, the small little micro movement. But anyways, so like this is still better than that initial one. Coming out further is still better. This is still better than that. So on and so forth. The point we're making here is that you never really want to attack the group head on. You always want to hit them from the side or from the back. And yeah, I know there's an AO somewhere in there. Safe zones versus conflict zones. So if you imagine the point as 4 points, or as 4 quadrants here. So let me edit this real quick. Actually, it would just be easier if I did this. So if you imagine this right here as the point, the circle representing the point, the squares representing the respective quadrants of point. This is top left, this is top right, this is bot left, this is bot right. 9 times out of 10, the last point is always going to be C point. The first point is going to be B point. A point is usually the free point. Knowing that, right, you have 3 points here. If we've taken A point, which is normally to the right as attackers, and they have C point, what's going to happen is we're able to push from this right side and this bottom side because we're coming from war camp or coming from A, right? And over time, what ends up happening is the healers are going to primarily be in this top left quadrant. So this is a safe zone for the enemy healers. That means conversely, it can be incredibly dangerous for our players to be in this area. That's why if you'll notice, when you watch your VOD from last night, you'll see that when our players died, it's usually because they were closer to the top left area of the map, or of the point. Now, the opposite is true in the sense that bot right is our safe space, right? Because we have the most pressure pushing from the right, pushing from the left, which means the bot right, from the bottom, which means the bot right is our safest space. So our healers should be able to play off of the point relatively safely in this area by default. Now note, there are assassin players that their entire job is to bypass all these defenses and still get to the healers. But I could go on a rant about healer positioning for a while, so I'm going to try and stay on topic. So the original point that I was trying to make here was conflict zones and safe zones. So this is a top left is safe zone for the enemy. Bot right is the safe zone for us, which makes bot left and top right conflict zones because this is where we start to clash. We can't literally run just at them because, you know, right here is the flag, right? We have to be looking at this bot left quad, looking at this top right quad, just like they are. Those are the quads where most crashes should be called objectively. The only time you should be calling a top left crash is if like the enemy's just made a horrendous mistake and your team is in position to capitalize it. Your kill squads are in position to capitalize on any healers that are healing that area, or you're just flat out winning anyways. Ultimately, where I'm going to call crashes is going to be dependent on where our disruptors are. If I see our disruptors are off to the bot left, I'm going to look to call crashes bot left. If I see that they're left middle, I'm either going to call left middle or top right. Why is top right included there? Because top right, if I'm already at a point where I've taken over bot left and bot right, top right is still a conflict zone. I probably have a lot of pressure in that point. If I'm at a point where I control 3 different quads, then yeah, sure. Well, let's look at top left. Or if they crash really stupidly in top left, I'm going to try and re-crash on that. But when it comes to aggressive crashing, when we are the ones initiating that fight, it will mostly be in the bot left and bot top right areas. Alright, main point versus side point. So yesterday, you might have noticed that in the raid plan, right, we had like 8 groups sitting on C point. And then we had 3 groups sitting on A point. After they took A point, we had those 3 groups go straight to B point. Those 3 groups represent that side point, or in this case, right? And what I mean by that is like initially they're on A point. But when they move to B point, technically B point can be considered the main point in the sense that it's the middle one, right? But that it will just lead to confusion. The only main point is wherever our main army is. So if we have 8 groups on a point, it doesn't matter if it's A, B, or C. That is the main point. Now, at the beginning of a war, after we take that free point, anything we're doing at that point is to make sure we take B. Even all the pressure and all the people we had on C was not to take C initially. Like, don't get me wrong, if we could take it, that's great, right? But 9 times out of 10, what's going to happen is, just like we saw yesterday, through our superior macro, believe it or not, we were able to take B point and they weren't able to stop us, flat out. Because otherwise they would have lost C too. Medium factors you should be aware of: healer ranges. I would really recommend you get with a healer. Really take the time and be like, all right, well, can you heal me from here? Can you heal me from here? And memorize that fucking distance. Because you need to understand that if your healer can't reach you, it's not their fault you're an idiot and you're off in Narnia and that's why you died. It's because you're an idiot that you died. Coordination. Your cooldown should be coordinated. So for bruisers, for example, usually if I'm calling a crash, you're really only going to use one weapon's worth of cooldowns. Unless I'm saying, hey, stay in, stay in, stay in. And then at that point, you're just letting it rip. But even then, if I'm calling a crash, you use the first set of cooldowns, you're getting the fuck out at that point. If I tell you to stay all in, you may use all your cooldowns, and then you're getting the fuck out. There's no point in ever staying in a crash when you don't have cooldowns to use. Flat out. You will contribute more to the fight by being on the edge of the fights at that point and trying to half heavy if you're a bruiser, or scream if you're a VGIG, the players that are around you, or that are trying to exit that crash because they're low. Respawns, as you know, like we were calling resets yesterday, that's how we coordinate those respawns, so just be aware of that. You should also pay attention, like if you have 3 people in your group dead, right, and one of them is a healer, you probably want to play your life. You probably want to play a little bit safer and maybe not go to every crash. If it's even remotely risky. It's more important that you stay alive and are able to pressure than anything else. Communication from Canary to main comms. Over time, we are going to swap to TeamSpeak, and it'll make this a lot easier. But I need to be able to get updates from groups. For example, today I was watching a VOD where I saw an entire group. Multiple times when I told them to do something, they just kept defaulting to the same exact position. Why? That was one of their first genuinely competitive wars, and they are still working on understanding what they need to be doing in the war. And that's okay. Like I said, it's our first war. But that's something you really got to think about. When I'm calming, you need to be able to not only tell me, hey, because, the other group was left up Schitt's Creek and ended up just flat out ignoring my calls and going somewhere else, when if they had just told me, like, hey, we don't have anybody coming with us into Appelbahn, I could have called that group out directly and gotten that group to start moving in with them. Pre-pot callouts, like, if you know a crash is coming, you hear me saying, hey, we're looking for a crash, I'm looking top middle, top left in 3, top left in 2, left side in 1. You, as the quad group that's looking to respond to that crash, right? You can remind people, hey, I'm cleansing. Like, if you say you're cleansing, it's going to remind the bruiser in your group to cleanse as well. It may sound really simple, really stupid, but you would just be surprised how easy it is. Just by calling out the abilities you're using, the consumables you're using, you may remind somebody who's forgetting that they have those tools available to actually fucking use them. It also allows them to play around you much better. I saw a couple bruisers yesterday that were incredibly quiet, for example, where situations where I literally would watch a healer use a Divine Embrace, and because the healer didn't call it out, you didn't know about it, or sometimes even like the healer did, and what would happen is the bruiser would go and pop a potion, putting them over 50% HP. Why is that important? Because if you are over 50% HP and you get healed by a Divine Embrace, they do not refresh their cooldown. So now you have 2 to 3 seconds where you are not able to whatsoever get heals from a Divine Embrace. And that usually kills a group. The biggest skill check for a healer is how long can you keep your Divine Embrace while getting it on cooldown. Make their lives easier. Healers, if you don't have cooldowns, you should also be calling that. Hey, I don't have any heals. You know what that tells your group? Holy fucking shit, I'm glad I have my consumables. That's what it tells your group. And then they pop that shit. Low-level factors that every one of you, like, these are skills that objectively, even whether you have 1 hour, whether you have 80,000 hours, in which if you have 80,000 hours, okay, but whatever. These are skills that doesn't matter what your weapons are, these are skills that will directly be involved in every single one of the classes? How do you use your consumables? Do you open your map to see how the army is looking or where your group is even? Cooldown discipline. Are you using your cooldowns as they come up? Even though you have your detonate up, even though you have your vines up, even though you know I have a crash in the next 10 seconds. Confidence. If you're not confident in your actions, you're going to hesitate. And if you hesitate, you're going to end up dead on the battlefield. Just plain and simple. I don't think I need to really stress that anymore. What the group leader is saying, in this case, we're going to be talking about, like, in a quad group, what are the bruisers calming? What are the bruisers saying? In a disruptor group, what are the people who are calling targets saying? Maybe the Scorpions, maybe it'll be our blunderbusses. It just depends on the personalities for the most part. Anybody can be a group leader. It's a personality, not a class definition. That being said, it is always easier to be the group leader when you are the one with the CC and debuff based cooldowns. The reason I say this is because you're the one who sets up those damage players to be able to actually say 3, 2, 1 and burst somebody the fuck out. Otherwise, W key, a lot of players will want to sit there and S key or run the fuck away. You need to be aggressive, you need to move forward, and you need to take space. Shift key, a lot of people will sit here and spam that shift key just for movement. A lot of you probably do it in town too. You should stop that because that builds subconscious behavior so that when you really want to move somewhere, which of course you're in war, right? Every movement, you want to move everywhere, right? You will dodge when you're dodging fucking ghosts. And what does that mean? The moment that you need that stamina to be able to dodge, you're already stand-barred and there was no damage that you avoided there. Your dodges are meant to dodge abilities, not create distance. Spacebar, the jump key. Does anybody know how slows and dodges interact with each other? If you do, type it out or raise your hand and I can have it so you can speak it. Either way, I don't care. The question was, how do slows and dodges interact? Slows reduce dodge distance. I believe the only class that doesn't apply to is heavy armor, and that's because they literally just take a step forward. Your roll will be less. Your sidestep or your medium hop will be less. And what that'll lead to, especially if you're a bruiser on point and you're in the middle of a Gravwell, is you will have to literally use both dodges in order to get out of Gravwell. But if instead, if you dodge the initial throw so you don't get pulled in, and then immediately jump, you will immediately clear it, and you have only used one dodge. You've covered 3 times the distance that 2 of those dodges would have cost. These are the W key, shift key, and spacebar key are probably the 3 most important movement keys in the game. Who would have guessed? Become very familiar with using them in combat until it is second nature. To use it at the right times, not the wrong times, of course. Knowing when to get out of a fight. A lot of people have these egos about a fight where it's like, no, motherfucker, I got the biggest fucking hammer, the biggest fucking detonate here. I don't care who you are, I'm going to slay you. That's not how it works. Use your brain, drop the fucking ego, go in on the fights where you have the advantage, because if every time you fight you have the advantage, you should win the war. If you consistently fight when you're at a disadvantage, all you're doing is putting one hand behind your back, tying it, and then the other hand you're giving to your opponent and telling them to punch you. It doesn't make sense. Use your brain, pick the fights that make sense, not the fights that lead to you dying and watching a cooldown for 30 plus seconds. Scoreboard utilization. The scoreboard is updated live. So if you're a disruptor or you're a blunderbuss and you're hunting healers, or even you just want to know which players are the biggest impact to the war, you can sort enemies by kills, you can sort enemies by deaths, because believe it or not, right? The top 25 is not what's... Well, I'll go to that right in a second. You can sort it by healing. You can even sort it by damage dealt, right? And you can make a point, depending on what your role is, right, to look for those players. If you can quickly, with the, you sit there, you die, you're running out, you press N, you sort by the kills, and then you've seen a bunch of bruiser names, you called out a bunch of bruiser names, right? As a bruiser or as a main ball character. Look for those bruisers that are consistently getting those kills. Those are players that are probably worth default targeting. Look for those players with high deaths. If you see that 2 or 3 bruisers have 5 to 6 more deaths than all the other bruisers on the enemy team, you should target those bruisers anytime you see them. Why? Because they're worth just as much on that point as that best player that's going to take 8 of you to kill. I say 8, that's an exaggeration, but you get the point I'm making here. The bottom 25 is what determines whether you win or lose a war. I can mark the 25 best players in the game. If the 25 worst players are on that, there's a very good chance I'm still going to lose, because what's going to happen is that enemy team that we're fighting is literally just going to put half my army on farm, and so all of my best players, quote unquote, now have to be worth 2 players in everything they do. Scoreboard utilization is absolutely huge. And then, of course, disruptors, right? You can see somebody healing in real time. You hear a crash is going, you press that scoreboard, you have a somebody healing, pay attention to the healing numbers that change. You now know what people to target. The game provides you the information. It's just a question of you knowing where to find that information and then ultimately using that information. Phases for war. The biggest thing I really want people to focus on right now, like pretend that phase 2, 3, and 4 don't exist right now. Preparing for war. Ignore the spreadsheet roster. That's from a different time. If you know, you know. Canary is set up. Right now we're using Discord Canary. The goal is, though, that we will be moving to TeamSpeak. For our console players, what does that mean for you? For our console players, there is a $1 whole American dollar application you can get on your phone. Put a headphone in under your headset. And now you can have that phone comms be the shot caller, or you can have the comms for your phone be your actual group, and then you have a second set of headphones that are connected to your console that is hearing whatever your default comms are. So now you're hearing both your group and you're able to communicate to your group while also still hearing the shot caller. And wait, actually, hold on a second. I was still describing it like it was Canary because I'm a fucking idiot. You need your headphones for the game, for sounds in the game. I can get into why the sounds of the game is important, but your headphones at that point would be from TeamSpeak, and in TeamSpeak you'd have both your 5-man comms, and you would also hear me through your TeamSpeak without me hearing all of your group talking. It's incredibly valuable that we move to TeamSpeak. You'd be surprised how quickly that can improve the organization and coordination of the army. The reason for that is so you know how in Canary you guys are all in 5-man comms, right? Imagine if I was in that same Discord with you, but I hit a button and I'm talking to all of you at the same time. You can hear me, but I can't hear you. You can press the button and then whisper something to me so that only I hear that, or only the point team hears that, saying, hey, Group 4 is completely dead. Hey, Group 6 has just wiped the enemy Group 6. Hey, Group 10 just won. We're looking in. Those sort of comms can determine what I am willing to do as a shot caller, and it can increase my tolerance to risk, some would say, because I already know we've won in other areas. Or I can be more careful because I know we've already lost in a couple groups. If the limitation on information is not my ability to understand and comprehend it, you're not giving me enough. It's okay that information gets lost in the sauce, because over time it won't be. Outside the fort, as you guys saw yesterday, our first point capture, it's a free point, we took that shit. Our second point capture, our macro is pretty solid for the most part. I will say that on C point, the groups that were on C point, when they initially pushed over after having wiped B the first time, you motherfuckers completely ignored me for the most part for probably 30 to 45 seconds. I'm not exaggerating either. Where I had been calling for you to go into Appelbaum Forest to pull the enemy team with us. Instead, you chose to fight on point, and a lot of you ended up dead. And because of that, we were not able to get to fort at that point, believe it or not. Because if the 4 to 5 people that had died in that situation had been alive, when I called to push onto point, we would have been able to step onto point, immediately would have been fast ticking because of how many people they sent to B. And so, by default, we would have, if we didn't win that point, it would have been a 90% take. How good would it have felt compared to what we were able to do yesterday if we had 90% on C point? Macro is how you win wars. And then third point capture, we'll talk about that in a little bit. For my point teams, normally they need to be playing top of the point. And when I say top of the point, I'm saying like from top left to top right. Like if you were to cut those quads in half, and then only use the part that's the very top of the point. Ideally, that's where the point team is playing 75% of the time. Moving out of that area as needed. Sometimes I'm going to call for crashes bot left. Sometimes I'm going to call for crashes in other quadrants. Sometimes they're going to be able to play in top because there's going to be so many enemy players in top. Point team, for the most part, is going to dance around the point, but their goal is to be top. The reason for that is if I have 20 players in the top of point, that means that none of their healers can step on that point, which means that their healers have to wrap around through Opalbon or Bonfire to heal groups that are in the bottom of our point. Their point team, their top quads. If they have to do that and we're winning in those respective zones, they are having to put their lives as healers at risk. Or they flat out aren't even able to get in time or get into range in time to place those heals down. Either situation, it creates an advantage over time for us. It doesn't matter how much of the point we hold. It matters how many people we have stepping on the point. So remember what I said earlier, right? The absolute worst player who's getting killed 16 fucking times can literally be the reason why the defending army loses. Because that player was dead. If that player was a bruiser, if that player was dead every time and our bruiser was able to just stay alive, by default, they have to commit more resources to the point. If by default they have to commit more resources to the point, that means that's less points or less people defending their healers. If there's less people defending their healers, our fucking assassins get to farm for free. And if our assassins are farming for free, no one on the point lives because they don't have any healing to keep them alive, and we just wipe them. It's a circle. If any of those steps are not happening, the entire process breaks. And that's why it's so important that everybody in the army does their job. We briefly talked about this earlier, but playing your life, the point team's only real goal is to survive, dump your utility-based cooldowns on the point until your detonates are up, and then ultimately crash when I call it for the 3 bruisers. The flails are looking to either set it up so you can quickly get into the clump, or set it up so you can get out of it. But we'll talk about that at another time. Ball teams, you are basically kind of... you're a front line, but like you're still not as tanky as the point team, right? Your job is to make it so that people cannot play in your quads safely. All bruisers, if I'm a group 3 bruiser, I should be right next to my other group 3 bruisers. I should be hitting the same targets my other bruiser is hitting. He should be hitting the same targets I'm hitting. I should be using my cooldowns off cooldown until my detonate's up. When my detonate's up, I'm waiting for my shot caller to tell me, hey, it's time to crash. I'm just half-heavying with a hammer until then. Literally. It's all you have to do. That's how simple Bruiser is. Now, it's easy to say that, right? In practice, you have to take into account who's hitting you, where are the heals, what can you dodge, what can't you dodge, making sure you don't get surrounded. Like, there's a lot more to it, but that is literally the core of a Bruiser gameplay loop. It's why it's probably one of the easiest classes to get into war on. Because you don't even have to care about the kill squad groups. Whereas the kill squad groups have to take into account what you on the point are doing in order to determine what they're allowed to do. So, ergo, not really as a 5-man unit, but as a 4-man unit, between your healer, 2 bruisers, and a Void Gauntlet, Ice Gauntlet, work on a single entity. Whoever, your VGIG is constantly debuffing them. They're holding their ice wall for that crash. You're using your cooldowns to get your detonate. Both of you get heart runes up. You look for that crash opportunity, but until then, you're dogging people down as a group of 3. If your VGIG is getting pressured, you're pressuring the people pressuring them, making it so your VGIG can get away. If one of your bruisers is getting pressured, that the other VGIG and bruiser helps get them out of that situation by pressuring the people pressuring them. It's even something as simple as being able to throw a shockwave down and stun 2 or 3 of the people that are dogging one person can be the difference on whether that person lives. For ball teams, you're very rarely going to get a haste pot unless it's like you only have enough to buy one. You have like 20 fucking cleanse pots and you want to get to the other point quicker. That's a good time to buy a haste pot. With haste pots, though, be aware if you dodge, if you jump, if you use an ability, anything, if you get hit, you will lose the haste. So many times I've seen people pop a haste pot, dodge, and be like, why the fuck am I moving so slow? Like, yeah, idiot. You know why. Disruptor teams, this is technically the highest skill floor to get into wars, in my opinion. You have to know a lot about the different roles, the different weapons, their weak points, and their strong points, and understand how to play around all of those. It should be second nature to you to be able to dodge things like leaping strikes at least 3 out of 4 times. To be able to dodge shield bashes if you can see it coming. Being able to dodge scorpion throws. It's not always going to be the case, right? The other player's skill is a part of it, but if you see it coming, you should be able to dodge it before you even realize it's happening. That's the level of reaction speed that some of these players have, including myself. There's been plenty of times where I've literally dodged something and it literally was coming from behind me and I didn't even see it on camera. And sheer luck is what I usually chalk it up to. But when it happens consistently, it's because of experience. So that's why when people say shit like OPRs don't matter, they're full of shit. OPRs do matter. You need the experience for what the different weapons do and what their strong points are. But anyways, back to disruptor groups before I go on another tangent for the 80 millionth time. Knowing when to fight versus when to flight or run away is incredibly important. If I'm a disruptor and I'm pressuring a bow player and I hear that my healers died, I probably want to get out of that fight because I'm going to die. If I hear that a member of my team has died that was meant to peel my healer, I should be aware of that and try and peel for them. If I'm pressuring a healer and suddenly I have 3-4 people that are looking at me, or even 1 or 2 people looking at me, I should probably figure out it's time to leave. You're going to only learn that from experience, and if you're a disruptor and you want to learn that in OPR, never go through the front door middle. Always go through the back and trust, you'll learn. Center roll normally runs Scorpion stopwatch. Now, no, this is what a quote-unquote meta company will run. I'll talk through what we are doing afterwards. Usually we'll run Scorpion plus stopwatch. The entire job is to pressure the healer because the moment that sender is able to lock that healer in a cooldown and calls that out to the DPS rolls. And when I say DPS, I'm talking about like the range players, like the 2 bows in a wide group historically. If I know that the healer is CC'd for the next 15 seconds, that means I can continue to left click that one bow together with the other bow while the other player, the other melee player is pressuring that same player, and that person should die because they shouldn't be able to get heals for a very long period of time in a fight. DPS rolls, normally they're DPS spears, and what we mean by that is either Venom as an artifact or just flat out a spear with something like Fortifying Perforate, Plagued Crits, and I think Attunement for the last one, but it's been a while since I looked at a DPS spear roll. Point quadrants don't mean jack shit to y'all for the most part, except for one simple thing, when I'm calling crashes. As a disruptor team, if I'm calling a crash in the bot left, it's probably because you're in the bot left as a disruptor team. If I'm calling a crash and you're near the quad that I'm calling that crash, you should be looking for healers that are off of point, range players that are off of point, that are looking to impact that crash and take out those players. Now, of course, if you're fighting your enemy disruptor group, it's not all 5 of you doing that, right? Usually it's the range players like the bows, the great axe blunderbusses, etc. that'll look inwards together for that small little burst of pressure, because if even one healer has to DE themselves instead of that clump, that is potentially 3 people that just died because of that. Because that's how you can bounce Divine Embrace on 2 other targets if people are low enough. The clump is not for you as a disruptor team. The only group that's an exception to it is Group 8. But I'll get into that in a little bit. White team. Now, no, I want to point out, I haven't even really gotten much into showing anything. It's mainly been death by PowerPoint. There's a lot of information that goes into wars. We've been doing wars for years at this point. This has all been learned from blood, sweat, and tears as we tried our damnedest to beat other people, simply put. But white team, so you remember that concept of the best place to engage the fight is objectively from behind someone? Which means instead of going ahead at someone or where they're coming, like if they're coming straight at you, don't go straight at them. Wrap even slightly to the left or slightly to the right, and suddenly you're at a better engagement point, right? That is why the white team exists, because that's why disruptor groups exist. Disruptor groups' job is to flank the enemy and then ultimately kill their healers, kill their fire staffs. But then you essentially meet, so imagine like on football, right, where there's that line of scrimmage and you have players matching up with players. The same general concept applies here. So I'm going to skip to this slide real quick, where Group 8 meets Group 8 in this lane. Group 9 meets Group 9 in this lane. Group 10 meets Group 10 in this lane. Group 7, usually if this is the ramparts, they'll come in through here, but ultimately if they need to peel back, they can peel back this way because then they'll have support from other blues. You have quad DPS that are playing, depending on where I'm telling them to go. They may push directly in through their road and look to pressure this area. They may push behind the quad groups and disruptor groups pushing through their road. It all depends on the raid plan, right? But the things that will never change is where should your quads be and where should your disruptor groups be. Now, that being said, this is the default. What you need to understand is war is very, flexible, right? And what I mean by that is, as the attacker specifically, we are the ones who control the pace. If I sit in fucking war camp, yeah, we're not doing anything, but that's because I don't want to do anything. The defenders didn't have a choice in that. If I want to play in Appelbahn, they can have a choice in that. They can try to stop us, and they can even succeed. But I'm the one making the choices, and they have to respond as defenders. Which is why aggression is what is important, especially as an attacking war. Now, your lives are the most important thing in the war. Please don't misunderstand. But you can be aggressive in the right moments and play your life in the right moments, and suddenly you become a great player. Overnight, it's crazy. While this is happening, right? If I see groups 8, 9, 10, like basically fighting as a line where you see my mouse right now, maybe this will make it a little easier. Like if I see them basically fighting along this area here, then I know I can call bot left. You can also look at Appelbahn and see these things and try and predict where you expect me to crash so that you can be ready for the crash even sooner. You should be thinking about what the next 10 to 15 seconds are going to look like based off what the point state is. Group 8 should always match Group 8. Group 9 should always match Group 9. Group 10 should always match Group 10. You match your fight so that none of those groups can get behind you. If Group 7 matches Group 7, they cannot get to our sweetie gooey insides. And we're going after their sweetie gooey insides in that top left quad. When it comes to point movement, if you can't tell from this graphic here, I'm just going to focus on that. Let's pretend kill squads don't exist, right? This is generally how you should view entering and exiting the point depending on what quadrant you are playing in. In this case, right, top quads are most likely going to enter from the top of point because that is the point that's in the opposite, or that's in the same direction that the enemy is coming from. You're moving in the same flow that they are. So they're not trying to stop you in that direction. Meanwhile, your bottom quads, thanks paid actor, your bottom quads, you're entering from the direct side if possible. You don't want to enter from the bottom. You're actually using the bottom to exit because that will actually be the easiest place to exit from, unironically, unless you're like obviously already surrounded or they literally call a crash in that location. That being said, like once again, bruisers and void gauntlet, ice gauntlets, you need to be fighting on the point as much as you can. Every moment that you guys are off point, we are losing tick. It's just that simple. Let's look at a raid plan. I don't know if this is a good raid plan, but we're gonna find out together. Yeah, this is good enough. Oh, but you're not gonna let me edit it. So this is just one. I'm just gonna click make a copy. Fuck it. Or I could just go to another one. Fuck it. We use Weaver's Fen for example. Nope, that's a defense. We don't care about defenses right now. Monarch's Bluff it is. Oh, you look awfully familiar. Alright, so looking at this, right? We have our main Zerg going off to C point, just like every other war, right? We're pressuring C point, not to take C point, but to take A point. We have group 3 here, they come out and they evaluate essentially. How many people are at B point? If the answer is more than 5, they run like a chicken with no head, right the fuck back to C, and then just reinforce and we go to a standard split here. Now, if nobody's on B at all, and they just straight up followed us to C point, 3 can sit there, step on B, and completely freak out the enemy army. Because now they might send 2-3 groups here, right? Which gives the C group a advantage, because now if there are 2-3 groups down, or even 1 group down, if we have the number advantage, we can start forcing a tick. If we can start forcing a tick, we can start winning the C point flat out. Make the enemy panic and make the wrong decisions, and you will easily win the war. You don't do that without proper macro. Once we take that second point, or that first point, historically, if you're still having trouble with 2 points, what will happen is you'll end up moving from that C point over time via respawns towards B point. So in this case, groups 3, 4, 5, 6, 1 and 2, 8 and 7, we're on that B point, right? Group 10 is still going to stay on that C point. Remember, you just have to have one more person to be able to tick it. So even if it's a 5v5 or a 50v50 on C point, you just got to have one more person. So if group 10 is shit hot and is able to kill even one person on C point, at that point they just all have to live and stay on the point and they're ticking. If they kill 2 people, they start fast ticking. If they kill 3 people, they start fast ticking. So you can very quickly snowball it. So then their enemy group 9 has to come, and if their enemy group 9 is coming, so does ours. And so now they technically didn't accomplish anything. So now they're forced to bring quad groups, right? From B point to C point because now their kill squads aren't enough. And they have to save C point for defense purposes. B is a fucking terrible point to defend, I promise you that. Can it be done? Yes, but it's fucking incredibly frustrating compared to C point. The point I'm making here is by the decisions we're making, by the fights, the small little fights we're winning, those small advantages can build up into snowballs that lead to us not only able to take a point and ultimately get in the fort and then win that war. If, hypothetically speaking, we moved our main Zerg over to B point, we're still not able to take it, we may look to reset because at that point, like we're already at the disadvantage on B point. We want the enemy team to reset their advantages. We move our Zerg over to C, they have to follow us. They get a soft reset on how much of the point that they're mainly defending being covered. And then ideally, 467 is able to move in at that point where they hit that tipping point of having superior numbers or the right position or getting a good crash. Thanks for the follow, QP. To then start taking B point because objectively still, the goal is to take B point. That is the point you're going to take when you're down to 2. When you get to the last point here, groups 3 and 4, you're going to be bottom of the point. Groups 5 and 6, you're going to be top of the point. Group 7, you're not entering like this. You see, you're not entering like this. You're coming like this between ramparts and the fort. You're going to look to get active in this area here. And once you own this part and your Rangers are able to sit right up here, you're beaming down. You're making sure no healers can play on the right side in Bonfire. If Bonfire is clear and our healers can play there for free, by all means. If their enemy disruptors are not able to push in a Bonfire, we're cooking. Especially because over time what's going to happen is groups 5, group 3, so like 4 and 6, you know, if we're talking about a reset here, right? 4 and 6 will be on the top right here. 3 and 5 will be on the bot right here because we're pushing together. 3 and 5 here is the front line. Group 8, Group 9, and Group 10, these are the kill squads, right? You're looking to meet the enemy team equivalent of you. So as you push up here, right? You're the front line so that the people can't just step off of a point and start hitting disruptors. As you reach that point where you start fighting people in this area here where the sword is, you know, 8, 9, and 10 are essentially able to wrap around, most likely meeting and then matching groups 8, 9, and 10. Now at this point we have what is known as an L-shaped ambush in the sense that we are attacking from 2 different sides here. If they have to look in both towards our road and towards Apoban, they're going to subconsciously continue to move backwards because they still also have to look at fort. The more space of Apoban we control, the less space their healers are able to play for free without any risk of being hit in the back. Apoban is the safest place for a defending healer to play, provided they can keep Apoban protected. And then it ends up reaching a point, right, where as you guys are wrapping here, like probably right when you get past the road, if you will, groups 4 and group 6 will end up stepping into their road. You're now looking to pressure and disrupt the groups in their road. 1 and 2 at this point will make the choice. Do they need to step on the point because nobody's on point, so let's start that tick so that they're forced to kind of double take and then remove people from their defense? Or if there's a fuck ton of people on point, take advantage of that. Those 4 groups can easily, 1, 2, 4, and 6 can push up in this top left here. Pressure these healers, make them disperse, and then step on a point. Because at this point, if you're making them disperse, they're not healing actively. And if they're not healing actively as we're pushing these folks back, somebody's going to die in that Apoban push. We control Apoban, and then suddenly the fight starts looking like this. Group 3, like we get to like the halfway point, groups 3 and groups 5 will end up going into their respective quads, right? Group 6, once we push past that point, may look to step into top left. Their team still coming from over here, from the fort. Group 8, their ideal position is going to ultimately end up being right here, and they don't really need to push farther than this. Group 9 wants to be roughly around here, where we're essentially forming a V, if you will. Group 10 wants to kind of get up here onto these ramparts and then be firing down into these healers for free, pressuring them from afar. Now, because of the way we're structuring our Group 10, it most likely won't involve bows. So what would actually happen is Group 10 would probably keep pushing and try and just be an absolute menace right about here. Group 9 would probably take a step forward, be an absolute menace right about here. And then you just kind of if they try to push you, you just kind of pull back, make it so they have to choose. Do they go to the point that's ticking, or do they go towards you, the people they're supposed to be matching? Make them make those choices. If they have to burn charge or their cleanse pot to get to point, the next crash, they're not going to have those abilities. Think of it that way. Your life is not worth those trades, but it is still ultimately a trade. And that is the goal here. We want to make advantageous trades. Healers and casters, as that entire process of like yeah, I totally fucked up these numbers here, by the way. I was wondering why this felt off to me. All right, that is better. So as these groups are pushing forward, right, our healers, our casters and such, they should be pushing with us. As we take bot left, or as we're pushing into bot left, our healers, our fire staff should be like right over here, and just constantly trying to make sure that our melee players, our ball groups, are between them and the point. That's how you know you're positioned appropriately as not only kill squads, but also healers and ultimately light armor players. Because if you can do that, then they're between you and the enemy, and you can keep them alive, or you can pressure the people they're fighting, and relatively be pretty free 99 on that. The disruptors should be able to handle the enemy disruptor, so you should be fine. So your left side is covered. And then it's just about moving with them, so that, because as we're doing that, right, we're spinning in a circle. They have enemy disruptors that are going to do this, because we don't have as much pressure on that Apo side, or on that bonfire side. And if you don't come with us, what's going to happen is they're going to find you. And they did find you, and the bot right, because a lot of you weren't willing to cross that fucking road when I called to push. Let me just do a time check. 8:55, 5 more minutes. Yeah, I can easily get this. I am actually not going to cover the fort at all until we're at a point where we are literally forting them, or forting the companies we're fighting. I'll give a 5-minute brief on this. So the way forts get taken is when we initially take that, or when we take that final point, the doors are able to be damaged, right? All of our groups will push up to A. Melee will take out the door. Ranged will handle warhorns from left to right. It is incredibly imperative that all warhorns are destroyed. Once the warhorns are destroyed, the doors at like halfway HP, whichever comes first, groups 7 and 8 will then push those back gates. There's some shenanigans you can do with back gates to be able to get up there quicker on respawns. We're not going to worry about that initially. If we get a free war where we're attacking, I will show that to people. Otherwise, groups, at this point I'll usually leave a quad group at a point where their only job is to try and avoid a gate going back up. Now note, if 15-20 people push out on that one group has no control over it. At that point they just need to pull back, play their lives, and hope that their range can stop people from repairing. It happens though. It happens. From all of the other groups though, outside of 7, 8, and let's say 5 in this example, so 3, 10, quad DPS, 1, 2, 4, 6, and 9. We'd all then push the B gate. Do the same thing. Melees handle the door. Ranged handle the horns. Fun fact: if you have an Ice Gauntlet is always the superior choice, whether it be VGIG or Fire IG. Ice does more damage to siege. After B gate is down, after those horns are destroyed, then 4, 6, 9, and all quad DPS will then go to C point. You'll do the same thing. Handle the door if you're melee. If you're ranged, handling all of the warhorns up top. There's also warhorns in between the respective gates that need to be taken out. This is usually a 3 to 5 minute process. Or not 3 to 5 minutes. It's like a 2 to 3 minute process, really. But it's incredibly important because otherwise, if the enemy army is able to pop those horns at critical moments, it completely kills any sort of progress we had. There's also 2 warhorns that I see get ignored a lot of times. The ones that are right inside. You know how like when you come in on the side gate, there's the stairs to your left, and then you have that horn right to your right if you're coming from A gate, or right to your left if you're coming from C gate. You can hit that horn through the door. You should be hitting that horn through the door. Until those horns are destroyed, I will usually not push in, shy of like B gate being an absolute stomp. Now, let's say everybody's at their gates, all the war horns are destroyed. At this point, I'm going to ask for gate statuses. I'm going to ask for red, yellow, or green status. Red means I'm incredibly outnumbered. There's no shot I'm getting through. Yellow means I might be able to get through, but I'm definitely going to get at least 1 or 2 casualties. And green means I can probably hit the point with at most 1 casualty. I'm going to be asking specifically for the side gate statuses. Back gates, I'm just expecting y'all to figure it the fuck out. I just need to know that you're at the gates for the most part. But these front gates is incredibly important that you give me accurate statuses. You don't wait until I give you a status, or until I ask for statuses. You're consistently updating me whenever from your perspective it's changed. If I literally have 3 people in my ear saying red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, green, 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 yellow, 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 red, yellow, I'm okay with that as long as they're also saying the fucking gates that they're a part of. And obviously not literally that fast. If 3 people are saying that to me, I have no fucking clue what I'm hearing. Shy of, hey, I heard only greens, right? Because I could only have eyes on 1 gate. I need eyes on all 3 gates. Once we push in, all quad groups need to push towards the point. The sooner you can get boots on that point, the sooner they have to abandon those gates. The sooner they abandon those gates, the sooner people are able to just come in for free and the fight is already on the point. It is a tanky meta if we are playing correctly. It is very easy to stay alive if you're playing correctly. Once you pull it into point, all the quad groups pull it into point. The kill squad group 7 and 8, they're controlling the stage. The stage is this top area right here where you see the 8 moving. If that area is clear, 7 and 8 will then split and look at the stairs. They'll push anybody off of the stairs. If the stage and stairs are clear at the same time, they'll then look into dirt. They'll pressure people in dirt, making sure healers can't play for free. 7 and 8's responsibility is not hell. Its responsibility is stage, stairs, and then dirt in that order. Lights in these groups should be calling to their groups, hey, there's people on stage, there's people on stage, there's people on stage. Don't just let them make the decisions, healers. You fucking put a goddamn leash on your bloodthirsty disruptors and kill squad members and pull them to the right location, kicking and screaming. While this is all happening, 9 and 10 are either going up the back gates, stairs all the way to the top to then wrap around to the top of B point or B gate. Or they're going up the front stairs if they can, right through the side gates to do just that. Their job is to control that top space so that we can start having healers, fire staff gamers, bows, even sit on top of B and rain hell down on that point. Make it so that if you are on point, you're dying and suddenly we win the war. If we can control top of B and at least one of the dirts, we can win a war. Especially in the fort, it is incredibly important that we are playing around respawns. If you're not playing around respawns, what's going to happen is if I don't play around respawns, I could call a crash, and then 5 seconds later, everybody I just killed is already respawned. That doesn't help a fucking soul anywhere. It's incredibly important you play around respawns. If you know that the respawn wave just went, and I'm not calling a crash, don't put yourself in terrible situations. Alright, I think that pretty much covers all the things I wanted to cover during a War 101. The next time, we're going to talk about the individual roles, and I'm going to give basically a breakdown of every single role at hey, in 5 minutes, explain this role so I know how to play with that role. Expect this to happen probably around Monday or Tuesday next week. I will stream this as well. At this point, I'm going to open it to questions. Was there anything that wasn't that clear for people? You want to ask a question, either hit the raise your hand in Discord, type the question out in Discord, or if you're in the Twitch chat, type in the Twitch chat. Mint says, awesome presentation. I learned a lot. That means a lot, man. This is actually the second time I've done this. I'm actually going to go watch the old one that I have uploaded on YouTube and kind of see what was different, what I covered in the first one that maybe I didn't cover in the second one, just to make sure I'm giving you guys the full picture. I just wanted to make sure I did this again, specifically for the reason that things change, the meta evolves, right? And I don't want to give you guys an outdated video I made 2 months ago when we were in a completely different meta. also going to screenshot the 18 of you who showed up out of the company. As far as I'm concerned, the people who actually show up to events like this, I'm a lot more likely to go to bat for you, to want to slot you over other players, because you're actually showing up to events like this and proving that, you know, you actually give a shit. I'm also right here going to write on the stream a code word where if you write this in your ticket, I will believe that you have watched this whole entire thing. Oh, well, I'm not writing it like this. Fuck that. Hold on. That was cancer. I don't even know why I pretended I was going to do that. Insert text box. The word is going to be in all caps, too. Yeah, I appreciate you, Freddie. Validus, at one point you said quads play around top point. Does this include bot quads? So I think I know exactly what moment you're talking about. I was saying something along the lines of, hey, pull the top, pull the top. When I'm making comms like that, if I'm using the word pull the top and I'm not, I need to be clear about that as a shot caller. But usually I'm talking about the point team, because sometimes the point team just wants to go after the biggest fucking group of reds. In reality, I need them to be building that pressure on top of point. If I'm calling spread, pull the top, spread, pull the top, spread is the priority for a default quad group. Yeah, like pull the top means that like your bot quads are sitting on this left middle or right middle, basically. So like think of it as your default aggressive stances. So like we just want to crash. I want to spread and pull the top. I want my bot left quad sitting on this left quadrant, or like left middle. I want my bot right quad sitting on right middle. I want my top left and top right quad sitting top left and top right respectively, near the middle of their quads. And then my point team is probably in the middle here. Quip, great presentation. Thanks for the time you put into this. I'm going to be honest with you. I put about 30 minutes into updating this today. So the me of the last 97 times I put this together the first time says you're welcome. Same comment to Madhouse. I already responded to J9's comment, or at least basically summarized her comment. Pull up that chart right there. It shows what the top means for bot quads. Like you're pulling to the top of your quad essentially. Vera, I appreciate the hey, I mean, I didn't draw this. In fact, this back part, there's two videos. If you're in the Discord right now, you scroll up. There's a game FAQ chat under the Logistics LLC. There is KS macro references made by the man known as Toofs. Toofs is a really good disruptor. He has his own YouTube. I'd really recommend checking out that video. It can give you more information about what your job is as disruptors. I have a video or two I'm going to share for like macro and ball groups specifically that I definitely plan to share with ball groups and expect you to watch. But yeah, any other questions at all? Any good bruisers to watch on YouTube? I would say I would more lean towards Twitch, to be honest with you. But like most of them will have YouTube, to be clear. But I want to. Oh, apparently there's drama going on. Streams I would recommend you watch is your boy Willie. One, this dude has poured his heart and soul into this game and definitely deserves the love, but mainly because he will literally shoutcast wars. And so what you can do is essentially watch a bunch of wars and see a lot of trends. A lot of wars play the same. And so you can kind of start to become familiar with what you should expect to see in wars. What does success look like? And so you can emulate that shit. For bruisers, I'd recommend Dusty Y is a pretty solid guy. I think he has really solid micro. I will say that macro wise, he does tend to be a little bit more stat patty, like what we described earlier. But objectively, like you need a stat patty bruiser or two in your army, because like those stat padding bruisers will usually create the situations that me as a shot caller, I'll see people that are low and then look to crash and benefit off that opportunity. Like stat padding isn't always bad, is what I'm trying to get at here. Who else? Oh, Insanity. He's usually considered a good shot caller. Yeah, I Forward was definitely somebody I was gonna. Oh my god, let me mute this. Glorious. Gurjaps, he's another one that I was going to bring up. Whirl Whip, another good one to watch. Not for the faint of heart. They definitely love their gamer words, but they're still objectively good players. But yeah, there's a lot of decent bruisers out there. If you're a disruptor, good man, a lot of really good disruptors have quit the game. To be honest with you, um, if you're a Fire Staff and V is pretty solid one. Beats by Icon, I think is pretty decent. Um, but yeah, what I'll do is I'll make a point to actually get. Oh hey, look, it's our favorite Twitch streamer. Yeah, like I4 is definitely a really good bruiser perspective here. Oh, we're like 8 minutes after we're supposed to start the. Yeah, but yeah, I'd say like if you were a bruiser, go watch I4's perspective. Let him know Decron sent you. In fact, I'm gonna actually send a. Oh no, because we're gonna do a Gorgon raid shortly. But yeah, at this point, I'm gonna go let me here say there's no other questions. We'll put out a list of streamers that you guys can look at. Oh, E4 Spartan. How could I forget that guy? He's a great bruiser, solid comms, no ego. Yeah, he's literally right there too. But we'll get a list of streamers you guys can look for, especially for war content, so you can look at what their comms are. Because just real quick, let's unmute I4's comms. He's calming his abilities. You hear the shot call getting ready for a crash. Pops his cleanse. Goes in, uses what he can. It's that easy. And I want to point out that in this quad, he has 2 players that used to be in a company I let. A lot of players, you'd be surprised, a lot of armies have quite a few players that at some point served a stint in Leandral. You too can be able to get into companies like this just by taking the time, uploading your VODs, getting them VOD reviewed, and continuing to be hungry and learn and actually improve. But with that, you're hilarious, Squirt. I'm going to cut War 101 from here. I have a Gorgon raid that I have signed up for that